So back in 2006, Square Enix released a trailer for a game they were calling Final Fantasy Versus 13. It looked really fucking cool, let's be honest. We had this one lone hero with what looked like these spectral swords floating around him, attacking a group of soldiers. In it was the groundwork for what the combat would become, fast-paced with a very key focus on teleportation. Fast forward 10 years, okay? And the game that was once called Versus 13 is now Final Fantasy 15. It would be very well received overall. The very first trailer that we saw, he was surprisingly close, both in content and character design, to the final product. I mean, looking back at that trailer, having played the game myself, I'm thoroughly impressed with what made it into the final game. Now that said, having actually played Final Fantasy 15, I can honestly say it is equal measures resounding success and abject failure. Oh wow, man, it pains me to say that. It really does. It pains me to say, but it has to be said. So, let's have a look at Final Fantasy 15. I shouldn't have to say it, but let's put a spoiler warning out there anyway. Shall we? Now I guess we're going to talk about the video game. We should discuss the gameplay. Makes sense, right? So let's look at the combat, because that's the crux of the entire game, is when you're fighting. And keep in mind, I played on the PS4, controls on Xbox One. Basic button combinations might differ slightly. It's pretty simple overall. R1 locks onto the enemy. Square attacks. L1 button dodges. Circle is teleport. Triangle is the items menu. And X is both jump and interact. Let's be honest, the jump interact button can be a pain in the ass, because sometimes you approach an item, try to pick it up, and your character's jumping instead. It's a slight pain, but it's only a small niggle of things, really. It didn't bother me that much, but it's worth mentioning. Is Square really, if you could patch something in, the whole jumping when trying to pick an item thing would be really nice to get patched away somehow, if it's possible, please. Now, as far as combat goes, to attack, you don't have to tap that square button repeatedly. Just hold on to it, and Noctis will just attack continuously. I tend to tap it more often than not, because I'm just used to your standard action game where I gotta tap the goddamn button. But there's no need. Same with blocking. No need to block constantly, or no need to tap the button. You just have to hold the button down, and Noctis will continuously block and dodge. Now, magic doesn't work like it has in past Final Fantasies. One thing I've heard a lot of people compare it to, including critics, is it's all like the drawing magic from Final Fantasy VIII. Kinda, sorta. How it works is, at certain points in a dungeon or around campsites that are scattered throughout the open world, you will have deposits of elementals. Fire, ice, and lightning. Now, you can draw these up to the number 99. Now, just drawing them isn't enough to cast magic. You have to go into your menu screen and in there you can mix the 3 of them into magic flasks to create your various types, your various, not types, various elements of magic: fire, fire, ice, and lightning, and the various strengths. As anyone who's played Final Fantasy knows, you've got your 3 standard strengths for any elemental spell: fire, Fira, Firaga. Now, you can also add consumable items or items you earn by defeating enemies, like trophy items that normally you would sell for cash. You can add those into the mix as well, and they can boost the strength of the spell. They can boost the number of times you can cast it. Generally speaking, if you only use the 3 elements, you've got a maximum of usually about three castings before you have to create the spell again. If you add these extra items to it, you can have that go up to, I'm not really sure, I didn't experiment enough with it, but you can see that number go up. You can make it so that it casts 2 different spells, one after the other. Blizzard followed by lightning, for example. You can add poison effects, you can add healing effects, you can even make it so that it randomizes what spells it casts. It's kind of neat. But I rarely use magic in this game for the sole reason that they're all area of effect spells, and your party members can be damaged by it. I can hurt my own guys, but casting magic. And in most fights, I'd rather not hurt my guys, especially when I'm fighting demons and the fights are getting really hectic and really punishing. It's hard to justify casting of a spell that's going to kill my guys, or at least help kill them. Because the problem is, if you cast ice, for example, while the ice effect is in place, your guys will constantly take damage until it goes away. It can get kind of aggravating. And so, except for the occasional flan or bomb, I almost never use my magic. And the only reason I use it then is because there's certain times when a flan or a bomb, you need to use magic to take them out, or you're going to be using a lot. And I mean a lot of healing items. It's pretty brutal. Overall, the magic is a small quibble of what I thought was more or less a very, very entertaining and robust fighting system. You can have different weapons or magics equipped to the up, down, left, and right directional buttons, and it's easy to throw off some decent combos. It's just, I thought the combat was engaging and fun. I had a good time warping all over the place and backstabbing enemies and working together with my guys. It was a blast, what can I say? I look forward to tackling some of the end game content as well, because there are a lot of really high level enemies out there, and let me tell you, when you see it at Adamantoise for the first time, oh my god, it's ridiculous. This thing is literally the size of a mountain. Just approaching is intimidating, and I can't wait to get high enough level to have a chance of beating this thing in under an hour. Now, with all of that looked at, you gotta wonder, well, geez, Jared, what didn't you like about it? It's all about the story, people. Really, that's where this really fails when it comes to the story. So, what's the game about then? Yeah, I'm still not entirely sure myself. I gotta be honest with you. It starts off as a road trip to travel from your home of Insomnia to the state of Tenebrae, so that you can marry the Oracle and unite your kingdoms. Then Insomnia gets attacked this isn't even spoiler territory. Uh, Insomnia gets attacked. Your father, the king, is killed, and the crystal that powers and protects Insomnia is stolen by the Niflheim Empire. So you are then tasked with retrieving this crystal and avenging your father's death. So it's sort of a revenge story. And then it takes another turn. Listen, the problem with the story, the biggest problem with it's not even the story itself. The story itself has the beginnings of what could be really good. I think there's a lot of promise here. But it's told so poorly. Oh, the storytelling in this game is so awful. It's the one of my biggest issues with it. I can deal with the fact that it opens with the foursome riding in their car with only the briefest explanations as to why. We know there's a treaty that's going to be signed between the Niflheim Empire and Insomnia, but that's where the entire thing falls to shit. Okay. Right before Nocta and his crew go to Alticia, we find out that the talks are sabotaged, the king's been betrayed and killed, and the crystal's stolen. Except you don't see any of it. You get the briefest of flashbacks, a very highlighted cinematic that gives you the very basics of what happened. But the whole story there isn't shown at all. And you know it. You can tell. In order to see the whole story, you have to watch the movie Kingsglaive, which is really bad move for us from an in-game storytelling standpoint. The entire time I watched the in-game cinema that was showing what was going on in Insomnia during the treaty, I was thinking wow, this looks like a trailer for a movie. Basically it was. And that's only the tip of the iceberg as far as what the game fails to show, because oh man, you do not see a lot in this game. Everything going on with the Empire, you don't get to see. They don't show you anything. Fine, that's a bit of hyperbole there, but they show you almost nothing insofar as the inner machinations of the Empire, what the Emperor is planning, what his motives are. Why the Empire wants this crystal is basically a complete mystery, other than they want it because they want power and to rule the world. So when that tide turns later in the game, there is absolutely no weight to it whatsoever. You're thinking, you're left with the revelation that the Emperor was just goaded into stealing the crystal for someone else's nefarious purposes. And it's a twist that's not unlike that at the end of the second last act of Final Fantasy VI. With the exception that with 6, we got to know the antagonists, we followed them through the game. We got to see their plotting, we got to see their motivations, and we got to have an understanding of their plans. So when Kefka came around and stabbed Emperor Gestalt in the back, it came as somewhat of a genuine shock, because at that point Gestalt was the bad guy and Kefka was a minion, a very psychotic minion. He's one of my favorite Final Fantasy baddies out there, but he was still just a minion. So when he betrayed the Emperor, it came as a huge shock. Whereas in this game, when the Emperor is eventually betrayed, you don't see it, but when he is eventually betrayed, it just comes off as oh, okay, sure. The only member of the Empire that you really have any consistent contact with is Arden. He's this constant threat / ally to the group, but his true intentions aren't really revealed until the tail end of the game. And I'll be completely honest with you, his constantly helping the group, I'm still not trying to understand why he did any of that. To the best of my knowledge, I'm not sure if his helping them proved to have any effect on the game whatsoever, other than just to further the plot along. I mean, even when he apparently out of nowhere kills Lunafreya for reasons, it's not clear. It's not clear why he does it, other than to solidify that he's not an ally. There really is no discernible reason for her murder, except to give the player and Noctis a reason to hate Arden. And it's almost as if they were going for some tragic death in the same vein as Aerith from Final Fantasy VII, but it falls so remarkably flat because we don't know anything about her character either. Hey, we're gonna get back to that though. Trust me, we're gonna get back to that. Now, in reviewing some wikis, I have since discovered that, and this is a bit of a footnote to that last point, Arden did kill her because she's the Oracle, and she was the only thing holding back Endless Night. They don't tell you that in the game either. I mean, even before her death, the nights are getting longer and the days are getting shorter. So I'm really not. I really don't know how we're supposed to make that connection. Again, storytelling in this game is at best poor. At best. And the last third of this game is where all the holes really surface and really start to just pop up, because it's where the story takes center stage. The first 2/3 of the game, when you're running around the opening continent of Eos, I mean, the story isn't really being propelled forward. You have a lot of side quests, you have all this open space. The gameplay really takes center stage at this point, and that's why it's so good and so strong. But when the story kicks in, and I mean really kicks in, and gets set to high gear, wow! Oh, does it fail? Oh man, I mean the problem here is that every single thing that occurs in this section falls so flat is because we have no connection to any of it. None of the twists feel earned or genuine. The only reason it feels even semi-interesting when we learn and find out exactly who Arden is because they've hinted that there's more to him than meets the eye. But the details about his past, none of it's even remotely suggested in the main game. Not even slightly hinted at. It comes out of left field. What about the characters? Well, they're a bit of a mixed bag. You have the main quartet of characters: Noctis, Gladiolus, Ignis, and Prompto. These are 4 friends, as I've said before, who are so close they may as well be brothers. And they are the backbone of this game. When I say backbone, I mean it. This game is make or break on their relationship, on their interactions. If the writers of this game failed with these 4 characters, the game, I mean, good gameplay or not, it would have been an unmitigated disaster if you didn't like these 4. Fortunately, they're fantastic. fantastic. Oh man, I mean, granted, they are clear tropes. Gladiolus is the strong one. Ignis is the smart one. Prompto's the goofball. Noctis is aloof. But they are so well written. They are so oozing with character. They're so likable. They rise above these very basic tropes. And I mean, the way they interact with each other, the way they rip off each other, this feels like an honest to goodness friendship.
What was that?
My bad. Kick the can.
You are killing me here, big guy. Are you trying to give me a heart attack or something?
It's a shame that there's almost no character development to propel them forward. The only development we get is that Noctis, we see him go from very unsure of himself to ready to retake the throne. And then there's Prompto, who we find out during what feels like a bit of a interactive cutscene, kind of like a random interactive cutscene. We find out that he suffers from feelings of inadequacy within the group. I mean, he's not special like Noctis, he's not smart like Ignis, and he isn't strong like Gladiolus. But by the end of the game, he's gotten over this, and he finds his strength, he finds his place within the group and his purpose within the group. And it's actually kind of a nice little arc for his character. There's no arc for Gladios. And, I mean, we find out a bit about him. He has a sister. He's part of the King's Guard. I think Ignis is as well. But other than that, I mean, there's no real arc for his character. His character doesn't really change over the course of the game. Ignis, we know he likes to cook. I mean, we know actually, come to think of it, we know less about Ignis than we do anyone else in the game. And Ignis as well doesn't have much of a character arc. His character changes physically, but there's nothing for him to really change. Nothing changes about him other than the fact that he gets blinded at one point. It's unfortunate, but we spend so much time with them, and the personages are so strong, and the writing and acting for them is so excellent, and just it's really fantastic. I completely forgot that I knew so little about them. The friendship between them, the relationship that ties them together, again, it's the backbone of the entire game. It's what this game is built on, and it works so good. It's so awesome to see. It makes the first two thirds of this game a real pleasure to play through. That makes the last third of it that much more disappointing. As far as the rest of the supporting cast goes, I mean, they're more or less stereotypes or archetypes, or just flat in one note. I mean, you've got Sid, who's the gruff old guy, his daughter Cindy, who's sort of the eye candy of the game, to the point where I sort of rolled my eyes when she came in with her hot short shorts and her halter top. It's kind of character's kind of ridiculous as far as the design goes. You have this little kid who serves no real purpose except to be really fucking annoying, and he, at one point in the game, near the end of the game, he picks up Noctis in his pickup truck. That's really the only point in this game where the kid was even remotely relevant. You have this old guy who takes care of the kid, who also eventually dies, and I felt nothing for his death because I knew nothing about him. I honestly still don't know who the family you meet a little while later, or even this kid. I don't know who they were in relation to the story itself, or in relation to the characters themselves. Either I wasn't paying enough attention, or the story didn't even tell me this. I'm not sure which it is. I'm kind of leaning towards this game's fault, to be completely honest with you, considering how the rest of the game is played out and is told. There's a general who serves as a very brief guide and sort of sets you on your path for collecting your family's ancient weapons. He's really just sort of there. He does his thing and then he's gone for most of the rest of the game. And the unfortunate part is there is no meat to these characters. There's no backstory to these characters, with the possible exception of Sid, who we find out was once very good friends with the king. Yay. It's hard to maintain a connection with characters you know nothing about or who really just don't serve much of a purpose to the overall story. It's rather disappointing. The only supporting player in this game that we spent any real semblance of time with is Galios' sister, Iris. And even then we only learn about her because of some extended sequence in Lestalem where she sort of gives Noct a tour of the city. And then when she teams up with the group to take a drive down to the coast near the end of the second third of this game, we learn a little bit about her in that drive, as well as the group chit-chats and discusses things a little bit. They talk, and it's kind of nice, but I mean, yeah. There's not much there, people. You learn a bit about her, but in the end, there's not much there. I've mentioned the villains in passing earlier while talking about this, and the problem is you never really get to see them. Unlike some of the best Final Fantasies out there, where you got to gain some insight into what the villains were doing or planning or their personalities during cutaways from the main cast. You had a few of those in Final Fantasy VII, you had a few of those in Final Fantasy VI, even Final Fantasy IX. I mean, these are probably three of the best Final Fantasies out there. 9 had some cutaways to the villains. You got to learn about them, you got to know who they were, sort of what their plans were to a degree, and we have to leave some stuff to surprise you as you play along, but you got to connect with the villains and really learn to hate them or pity them, depending on who they were. You don't get that here. You don't. I mean, there's an evil emperor. You see him like 2 or 3 times grand total when he steals a crystal, and again when he's a husk of his former self turned into a demon for what's essentially sort of a mini boss fight. You don't even get to see the transformation. It all happens off screen. You just hear about it or read about it and read about Arden's betrayal, and it's just it's anticlimactic and very disappointing. But maybe the most problematic of all of them is Noctis' love interest, Lunafreya. Now, this woman is beyond mismanaged. She's supposed to be this important supporting player to the game, but all we see is her writing Noctis letters. And she performs a summoning ritual of some sort, during which she unceremoniously dies. And you see her with her brother Ravus during a few flashbacks discussing Noctis and his role as king. But that's pretty much it. I'm going to be completely honest with you here. Her role in this story doesn't even make a whole lot of sense. I mean, she's going around summoning gods for reasons that have to do with Noctis accepting his destiny and ascending the throne. Still not entirely sure what that's all about. Why he's summoning these gods is never made clear within the game proper. And I've played through the game myself, and even I'm not sure exactly why she was doing that, why he needed to do that, or even what the exact timeline was. I mean, look, the entire time Noctis is going through the game, he's sending this dog back and forth with notes between himself and Luna, and the timeline here makes absolutely no fucking sense. It's just none. Okay? When Somnia falls, Lunafreya is present. She's there in the city. She leaves the city, presumably to wake the old gods and to prepare them for Noctis' arrival so that he can fight them and gain their strength. But every time we see her, it's in this lavish, very comfortable looking, kind of sterile looking room. And yet, when Noctis and his friends are hunting these summon creatures, these gods like Ramut, we're led to believe that they're almost right behind her, that they're like maybe a few days away from her. That's what it felt like. And it just, the timeline didn't make any sense to me. It just, I got nothing. I'm stammering here. That's how little sense the entire timeline made. And even if it made sense, even if it did, even if the timeline made sense, it doesn't take away from the fact that she's put up on this pedestal, shown to be this important character to the plot and to Noctis, and we know nothing about her. Nothing. We know she's kind, she's good, she's presumably pure, and the only reason we know any of this is because we glean it from the small snippets of her that were shown when she's doing nothing except maybe thinking of Noct. We don't know why. They haven't seen each other in like 12 years. The game never divulges this information. It doesn't give us a damn thing. The only time we see them interact is in flashbacks. We learn she has a brother, Ravis, who hates Noct, although we don't know why. Again, the game never tells us. There's no arc for her character, no starting at one place and ending at another. There's just the girl who dies for no discernible reason. Now, before I cover the last third of the game, because that's where the whole thing really falls apart, we need to cover something that's not part of the game. We need to spend just a little bit of time discussing the movie Final Fantasy XV Kingsglaive. Now see, other than the last third of the game, Kingsglaive is where the Final Fantasy XV really makes a huge misstep. It's a fucking doozy. Now, you might be wondering, Jerry, what's wrong with Kingsglaive? Nothing, really. I mean, overall, it was a fun romp. It tells a serviceable tale. There's some high-flying action you would expect with a Final Fantasy title. It was, honestly, it wasn't bad. But there's so much in Kingsglaive that should have been in the final product, that it's such a huge problem. Now, there are a few things that the movie covers that feed into the plot of the main game that really should have been covered by the game itself. First, we get the fall of Insomnia. The movie shows exactly how this whole thing went down. We show how the king died, we see the crystal get stolen, and we see the city fall. All of this should have been in the game itself. Would have made everything Noctis is doing. It would have made everything far, far more significant. Second, Lunafreya and her brother. In Kingsglaive, we are shown exactly why Noct hasn't seen Luna in God knows how many years. I think it's about 12 years. And we see why Ravus hates Noct with a passion. He blames Noctis and his father for his mother's death. Spoilers. Not really, it's shown at the very beginning of the fucking movie. And we see even more about Luna. She has more character here, has more of an arc here than she even comes close to in the game. Considering how important she is to Final Fantasy 15 story, that's kind of sad. Speaking of which, this movie, for the main characters, has more character development in the entire movie than Final Fantasy 15, the video game, does. I repeat, an hour and 50-minute movie, the last 45 minutes or so of which were pretty much non-stop action, had more character development than a 30-plus hour video game. I still don't know how that works. And by the way, we actually get to see far more of Noctis' father. So when his father dies in the movie, you feel kind of moved by it. When his father dies in the game, you think, because you only had 1 or 2 scenes with him, all you think is, that was sad. He seemed nice. Okay, enough about Kingsglaive. Let's move on to the final third of the game. Ugh. Eventually, the game leaves the open world of Eos as the 4 friends travel to the ocean-bound city of Alticia. Now, while attending a summit, Noct makes a deal with a politician who's helping keep Luna safe and hidden from the Empire. So this entire time that I thought the Empire had somehow captured Luna, during all these scenes of her writing to Noct and sending him messages with the fucking dog, she was actually with Alticia. Now the entire sequence plays out like an interactive cutscene, not unlike the way the Walking Dead games work. You'll have some dialogue, and then the game will sort of pause, and you'll have a set amount of time to choose one of usually 3 or 4 options. This will determine the outcome, determine how the ambassador reacts to you and treats you, and it amounts to fuck all. You think it's going to amount to something, you think how you interact will maybe affect events in the game at least a little bit, but they don't. I looked it up. All you get for performing well are Oracle Ascension coins that you can use to buy items in Alticia. Yeah. There are no story consequences. Just coins. All I could think was, thanks for wasting my fucking time. I appreciate the interactivity of the cutscene, but when you gamify it like that, and you give me no story-based reward, no change in the story, even if it's just a small section that's going to play out a little bit differently because of the choices I just made, it makes the whole thing feel pointless. And that's not good. It's not good at all. But gets worse. See, after the summit, the group splits apart. You have Noct going in one direction, and Ignis, Prompto, and Gladius going in another. And the focus is all on Noctis. Noct, he's going out to be with Luna and to fight the god Leviathan and the Empire. While the other three are just fucking off to fight the Empire and to try to keep the citizens of Alticia safe from all the violence that's happening. And all you see, again, is everything that's happening from Noct's perspective. At one point, Prompto saves your ass with this cool hover bike that he got off of one of the Empire's soldiers. We don't know how he got it. We don't get to see him steal it or obtain it or whatever the hell he does. We don't know. He's just shows up with the bike and then he's gone, and it's disappointing because I want to know, how did he get the bike? Actually, I want to know what the fuck is happening on the other side of this goddamn city. But no, all we're shown is what Noct is doing. And it's not even all that interesting. You think it is. You think, holy shit, he's fighting a god by himself. How could that not be interesting? Well, leave it to Final Fantasy 15 to fuck that up. Oh, this whole section is going to make me cry. I'm going to give it credit. At first, the fight is interesting. You take on some soldiers, and then you've got the god Leviathan, a very old misanthropic sort of god, and it's kind of interesting. You're zooming in, you're doing some cool aerial combat, and then you have to warp out of there, do some half decent platforming, use some quick reflexes to warp from one point to another. It's actually kind of fun. There's some strategy involved. There's some quick thinking against some quick reflexes, and the fight, you're thinking, okay, this is kind of cool, this is kind of fun, and then you're noticing, you're not doing a lot of damage, but okay, it's going to be a bit of a long fight, bit of a battle of attrition. Okay, cool, I'm fighting a god, that makes sense. And it all goes to shit when Luna dies. Arden comes in, kills Luna Freya. Noct gets to her, not in time, unfortunately, and she gives him her trident. And then the fight against Leviathan, it's just, you basically enter God mode. At this point, there's no way you're gonna fail this fight. I don't think there's a way to fail this fight, to be honest with you. You're pretty much invincible at this point, as you have just aerial combat. You're just floating around and attacking Leviathan for all you're worth, and it's boring. There's no challenge there. The God mode isn't earned. It's a boring slog. I was happy when that fight was done because I was just bored and I wasn't even the least bit challenged, and that's severely disappointing. So once you defeat Leviathan, she proceeds to flood the entire city, and Noct wakes up on a train with his father's ring that Luna had that she was going to give to Noct. I don't remember if you're told this earlier in the game or not, so I'm a bit cloudy on whether I was aware of this. I knew about it because she has it at the end of Final Fantasy 15 Kingsglaive, and she's told that, or she says she's going to deliver the ring to Noctis. But I don't remember if it's in the game proper. I'm willing to bet it's not. But I could be wrong. I'm just throwing that out there. Regardless, his team, when he wakes up, isn't this closely knit team that it used to be. Gladios has an extra scar on his face. Ignis has had his eyes damaged. He's essentially blind. Prompto, he's doing pretty good overall. He's just not his Bucky self. Mainly because of how hurt Ignis is and how Gladios is treating Noctis. That's right, and Gladios is being a dick, because Noctis is being self-pitying and whiny because the woman he loved, apparently, that he hasn't seen in 12 years, died in his arms, and Gladios is just like, fuck off, everyone's been hurt right now. Look at Ignis, he has no eyesight. And at this point, everyone's pretty much telling Gladios to knock it the fuck off. But he lays into Noct for being all self-pitying and not having the strength to really carry on and to be king like he needs to be. And okay, I can deal with a little bit of this. But the next section. Oh, the next section. Where do I begin? When the train finally stops, you have to go and explore one final dungeon, one final keep where one of your family's ancestral blades is held. And it's a slog, man. It's not a slog because it's difficult, but it's tedious. And it's not tedious because of the design of the level or because the enemies you fight. It's tedious because of your family, your three brothers, your three best friends. Ignis is blind, so he can't move very fast. Gladios is pissed with Noct for being self-absorbed, self-pitiable, and whining. Pitiable, pitying, whatever. So, because Ignis is blind, he can't move very fast. So if you run too far ahead, Gladios yells at you and gives you shit for it, forcing you to pause and wait for them to catch up with you. Constantly. You have to move through this dungeon at a snail's pace because of your friends. Because Ignis is blind and Gladios is being a dick, and even once in a while Prompto will come up and give you shit. I hated this dungeon. I hated it so much because of that dynamic. It was aggravating. I'm sure they were trying to push the idea that you work better as a team versus fractured, but still together. You work better when you have teamwork. And it just, in trying to hammer that point home, the game suffers for it. That entire dungeon was a slog. I hated it so much. Fortunately, it wasn't too long, but it was, let me tell you, it was long enough. Now, as the game goes on, you're ambushed by the Empire. You lose Prompto because Arden tricks Noctis into knocking him off the train, and eventually you find yourself in the kingdom of Tenebrae with an increasingly grumpy Gladiolus and a very blind Ignis. Fortunately, when you're in Tenebrae, which is where Lunafreya is from, you're doing most of the exploration there on your own. So you don't have to worry about Gladios yelling at you all the fucking time, or needing to keep up with Ignis. I was kind of happy for that. Unfortunately, there's no real way to explore Tenebrae because the place has been blown to shit, and it's pretty much almost always nighttime at this point. So there's no sun, so you can barely see anything anyway. It's a letdown. That whole section was a letdown. But at the very least, at this point, everything's moving pretty quickly. They're really getting you to the end of the game here. After Tenebrae, you find yourself going through some snowy wastelands. Most of this is really not worth going over too much because it's all more of the same. There's some good combat. Gladios is still a little bit annoyed with you, but it's not too bad. And then you get to the Niflheim capital. This is where things, for me, this is where the slog just became almost unbearable. First, you're locked out of your weapons. You have no way to summon any of the multitude of weapons that you normally would have at your disposal. Noct is cut off from his magic, so there's none of that. There's no teleporting. There's nothing, and it's a little bit aggravating. But it's still kind of cool. You at one point have to race your car through some streets to try to get into the city before the city doors close on you forever. And it's actually a very exciting sequence. I thoroughly enjoyed that bit. It was pretty cool. It was tense. I failed it once or twice. So that was kind of neat. Yeah, failing in a video game is neat because that means there was a challenge there. It was... Thanks. The game falls apart right after that because it's not long before you're separated from both Gladios and Ignis, so it's just Noct. Without his weapons, without his magic, with only his father's ring of Lucci, whatever. Your father's ring does give you some special dodge and attack abilities that use up your magic points. And then you eventually do get your father's sword. You pull it from the lifeless husk that was once Ravus. And your father's sword gives you the ability to attack, to attack directly. However, it also depletes your HP with every successfully landed blow. So there is some balance to be had in there. There's a decent amount of strategy to be had there. Unfortunately, it's almost too little too late. The game at that point is a slog. It's just, honestly, it was just boring. Your only companion at this point is the disembodied voice of Arden over the telecom, toying with you and guiding you for some reason. Honestly, I'm still not sure why Arden is acting the way he is with you. It's never made clear why he doesn't just kill Noctis outright. I still don't get it. Okay, and regardless, I mean, by this point, the chapters had been blazing by. Even the slog through that final dungeon with a blind Ignis. Even taking that into consideration, the chapters really have been going by pretty quickly since you got to Alticia. But here it just slows to a crawl, and it's honestly, it's really fucking boring. Without the rapport between Noct and his friends, it's really hard to get through, and I understand the point they're trying to make. You are stronger with your friends. I just wish they hadn't taken so long to make it, because I gotta be honest with you, for me at least, it really dragged. Oh boy. I mean, if you thought the part with Ignis was bad, with him being blind, this goes on for significantly longer. I'm not gonna put a number to it. I honestly can't remember how long, but I do know it was a lot longer than just that one dungeon. And then you take into account the fact that all of Noct's unique powers and gameplay have been stripped away from him, and it's a change of pace. I'll grant you that. A bit of a change in strategy, again, I'll grant you that too. But it doesn't make it fun. Not for me, at least. I mean, everyone's opinion is going to differ. Obviously, of course, I understand that, but I didn't like it. Now, within this area, there are basically two boss fights. The first is the Niflheim Emperor, who, as I said earlier, has been turned into a demon. Off screen, we don't see it. We just read about it in some journals. It's disappointing because such a big deal is made of this empire, and you don't get to really see any of it. You don't really get to fight much of it. During the game, you're being attacked by these dropships that just drop random match tech armor bad guys at you, and I figure, if the Empire's going to play a huge deal, I'm going to get to the Empire City, and it's going to be awesome. I'm going to fight Empire thugs, and by the time you get there, it's all dark. It's nighttime. You only get to explore the city itself. You're just exploring this one facility, and you're just fighting random crappy demons and this one boss fight. Sorry, one of two boss fights. And, I mean, the Emperor, this guy who killed your father and betrayed your father, he's relegated to, in the end, I'm going to be honest with you, a really easy boss fight. It wasn't even that difficult. When you recover your father's sword, as I mentioned earlier, you do get it. You get it off of the corpse of Luna's brother, who we later learned was confronted the Emperor. We learned this. I didn't learn this my first playthrough. Square, they updated the chapter 13, which is the most contentious chapter in the entire game, which is why I'm spending most of my time here on. That they updated it with some extra content just a couple of days before I started filming this. And one of the things they updated it with was Gladios going through the facility with Ignis, and you get to see some background stuff, which would have probably helped my enjoyment of the chapter a little bit. There's not enough of Ignis and Gladios, but the combat's at least somewhat interesting, much more interesting than Noct's stuff. And the background we get to see is really neat. You see Ravus confront the Emperor. You see the Emperor try to kill him. And then when Ravus is quite wounded, he sees Noct approach him. He tries to give Noct his father's sword. And Noct, it turns out, and no surprise anyone who has played through the chapter at this point, is just Arden in disguise, just fucking with Ravus one last time before cutting him down, but leaving the sword for Noctis to find. And when Noctis does pick up the sword, Ravus has, by this point, turned into a demon, and you are forced to fight him. And this fight is actually a little bit harder than the fight with the Emperor. Not a lot, but a little bit. So eventually, after far too long, you reunite with all of your friends, and you fight together for a little bit, and it's really good. I mean, the pace picks up. It's fun again. They're riffing off each other. They're ripping each other. It's good. It's fun. And then you get separated from them again after about not long. Let me put it that way, not long. And the unfortunate part about this whole thing, this whole rivalry between Noct and Ravus, is you only fight Ravus once before. You only interact with him in the entire game once before that I can remember, during a raid on one of the enemy bases when you're running around Eos. And it was a it was a lot of a much harder boss fight than this was. Let me tell you that much. First of all, and again, because there's no relationship built up there, the fight there's no bite to the fight. There's no emotional impact to it. It just comes off as a boss fight that you have to have because you should be fighting this character as a boss. Yay. Noct finds the crystal. He somehow gets drawn into the crystal. I'm not sure if he hibernates or he gestates in there. But 10 years pass. That's right. This game skips over 10 years of time, and Noct just finally awakens and emerges from the crystal. He's somewhere on Golden Key. He's on an island just off of Golden Key with, and I'm not even joking about this, a very nicely trimmed beard. Okay, I mean, the Bahamut who was in the crystal, and the crystal and the gods, they all decided, well, when Noct is going to come out, let's make him look good. They gave him a nice trim fucking beard. Why isn't it bushy? I'm sorry, 10 years? He should have I'm not saying he should have 10 years worth of growth from the beard in his hair, but at the very least give him a big bushy beard that at least looks like he's been sleeping for a while. He can always go to Hammerhead, the nice little hub city that you first arrive at. You just go there, get it trimmed, and then look all nice and handsome. I think it would have worked a lot better than being kind of silly, have this nicely trimmed beard on him when he just first emerges from his sleep. Ugh, this game is such a mess at the end. Oh my god. And so when he emerges and he starts walking up the coast, walking towards the road, we find out that there is no daylight anymore. All there is nighttime. And it's such a missed opportunity. It really is. The only reason we learn anything is because when he finally gets to the road, the kid from way earlier in the game, he's grown up, he's like 18, 20 now. For whatever reason that I can't recall, he picks up Noctis at the side of the road. I think someone had a vision or something, I'm really not sure why. And at the end, it really doesn't matter. He picks up Noct and he drives Noct to Hammerhead, and they chit-chat between each other. He catches Noct up on what's going on with Gladios and Ignis, Prompto, and the world at large. Gladios, those three have sort of split apart. They're just hunting demons by themselves now. They get together once in a while, but generally speaking, they're all on there or off doing their own thing. Ignis is still blind, but he can still cook up a storm, and you know what? He does pretty freaking well for a blind guy. He's back into doing combat and all that jazz, and it's nice to hear. But put to you this way: you get to Hammerhead, you meet up with everybody, and you're informed by the game that once you leave Hammerhead, you would be going straight to Insomnia, where Arden is staying. No exploring the world. No learning what it's like in this new oppressive, dark, evil world that's overrun by darkness and demons. Again, huge misstep. What I think would have been much better is Noct. Maybe he wakes up at the lighthouse, he wakes up in an island that's just off of the lighthouse, and he makes his way to the lighthouse, and there he meets up with the kid, and the kid drives him to all the different outposts and cities that you've come across during your travels. Or maybe he loans you a car, you get a car, some mode of transportation that's not Chocobo. Because the Chocobo would not be safe in this time period. And you slowly reunite with the boys, one by one by one. In each city, like the first 3 or 4 cities you come across, you reunite with one of the guys. One guy in Lestalem, and then one at another outpost, and then one in Hammerhead, for the sake of argument. I personally think you could have explored the world and witnessed firsthand what it's like, what Lestalem's like in this new place, what all the different outposts like in this new place, just so you can experience the world. I mean, not for nothing, but let's look at Final Fantasy VI again. When Kefka betrayed the Emperor and did his thing, he took over the world, became almost like a demigod, and the world went to ruin. Your party members are scattered all over the place, and you start off as just one. Can't remember her name off the top of my head. And the character of Sid rescues you from the ocean and is trying to feed you back to health. Sid himself, he gets sick, and so you spend the first little bit of the game just trying to nurse him back to health by catching him fish. Here's the thing. If you don't catch the good fish, Sid dies. I'm not even kidding. When I first played the game, Sid died. Eventually, I replayed it. I don't know if I replayed the section, I replayed the game, and I made sure Sid lived by catching him the good big fish. But it's beside the point. The point is, once you get out of there, you're questing across this ruined, blasted landscape. Not only are you exploring the world and seeing what it's like under Kefka and why it's so important to stop him and bring life back to the world, but you're slowly reintroducing yourself to all of the characters as you meet them and bring them back into the fold one at a time. You might have a few in a group, but generally speaking, it's a very slow process to get them all back, and the game and the story and the world building, all of it is better for it. 15 really could have taken a hell of a lot of cues from Final Fantasy VI. At the very least from Final Fantasy VI. It's just disappointing, that's all. When you finally go to Insomnia itself is actually pretty tough. It's actually pretty difficult. You're fighting some pretty high-level demons. And the thing about demons versus regular monsters, demons are ultra powerful, so these things are gonna fucking hurt. And it's not easy. I'm pretty sure I had to call down some summons at a couple of points in the game. And it was just pretty brutal. Let's look at the boss fights in this game, at the very end of this game. There are 3 of them. The very last one is Arden. The second last one is Ifrit. And the first one you fight is the Behemoth King. The Behemoth King is a harder boss fight than either of the last 2. I died numerous times trying to best the Behemoth King. Now, Ifrit, while easier than the Behemoth King, is still harder than Arden. Arden was/is a pushover.
As I was editing this piece, I realized that I forgot to take a closer look at Arden. And I don't have any footage ready for it, nor do I feel like setting up the camera, so you're getting a voiceover with, maybe not the greatest of mics, but there you go. Now, Arden is certainly an interesting character. He's charming, he's enigmatic, he's mysterious, but that all comes at a cost. Because once mystery is pulled away and his motivations become clear, his actions in this entire game make no sense. Now, it turns out that Arden comes from the line of kings, same as Noctis, and he was originally chosen by the Crystal to be the one true king. And in order to save the world way back when, he took all of what they call the Star Scourge into his body. Now, the Star Scourge is a plague that absorbs all natural light and lets monsters flourish. We're seeing this plague run throughout the entirety of Final Fantasy 15. Now, at this point in Arden's story, his soul was found by the crystal to be lacking, and so the honor of one true king went to his brother, which is where Noctis' family line begins. So Arden swore revenge against the crystal, wants to plunge the world into darkness, and end the line of kings. He did the former by killing Luna Freya. The latter by arranging the murder of the king, as we saw in Kingsglaive, and then trying to kill Noctis by toying with him until the end of the game, despite numerous instances before and after Luna's death where he could easily have just ended him. Does anyone else see the issue here? Anyone else? Now, before anyone out there says, if Arden had killed Noct, there wouldn't be a game, let me say in advance, then the writers and game designers should have thought of that and written the damn thing better.
Arden, he's your typical Final Fantasy boss. He has 3 separate phases, if you will. Some boss transformations, he has phases. The first is your standard on-foot melee combat phase, and it's actually probably the best of the 3. While on foot, you have to counter his moves, you have to dodge, warp, attack. You have to be pretty strategic with this part. I was actually kind of looking forward to the fight right there. The second is all up in the air again. It's all like when you were fighting Leviathan. Except there is no God mode, you're still going to be using healing potions, but there's significantly less strategy up in the air than there is on the ground. The third phase is once again all melee ground-based combat. Noctis is hurt, so he's limping a little bit, but honestly, it's anticlimactic because it's just so easy. Now, obviously, what's my easy may not be yours. I was level 65 or so when I did that part. Someone who didn't do all the side stuff I did while exploring EOS, I did a lot of side stuff. I leveled up crazy high for this part of the game. So someone who's a lot lower level than that may actually find the fight pretty tough. I didn't. It's unfortunate. And also worth noting, when you fight Arden, you fight, once again, alone. Which thematically and story-wise does make some level of sense. It's still just disappointing that, once again, Final Fight is on your lonesome. Regardless, once you fight Arden, you kick his ass, you beat him, then you get the endings. And here, once again, the game in equal measures both succeeds and fails miserably. There are 3 endings in this game. There's pre-credits, mid-credits, and post-credits. As far as the pre-credits are concerned, it's Noct making a deal with all of the former kings of Insomnia. He's communicating with them through his father's ring, and he's acknowledging that he knows in order to save the world, he has to sacrifice his own life. There's this nice touching moment with his father's ghost, and it all looks really pretty. I mean, it's gorgeously animated, but there's nothing there's nothing special here. First of all, there was no real foreshadowing that Noct would have to lose his life. The only reason I knew this was, wait for it, Kingsglaive. Kingsglaive set up this part of the plot, this part of how the ring works. Kingsglaive. Not Final Fantasy 15 the game, but something that's separate from the game. Again, that's not how you use that sort of extra media. You want to do a multimedia thing, I get it, that's fine, but I shouldn't have to read and watch everything else to get a good understanding of the events of the game. I mean, it's great if you want to have all the extra stuff to be supplementary and to give me a better understanding and appreciation of the lore, but for me to get the emotional core of the game, of the story that you want to tell, I shouldn't need any of that. Okay? Look how Dragon Age and Mass Effect have built their worlds through novels that exist outside of the game's stories. That's a much better usage of your extra media than Final Fantasy 15 did. And of course, the scene with Noct and his father, once again, because I didn't really get to know their relationship, it's kind of touching, but there's no emotional ties there. There's no emotional core there. I don't really care because you never made me care, game. The only reason I might care a little bit is, again, because I got to know the king much better in Kingsglaive than I did here. Fail. Utter epic fail. Now, the second ending, the mid-credits sequence, is all about Noct saying goodbye to his friends. And it's seriously touching. It's a nice scene. I got a little bit of a lump in my throat while watching it because these characters were the emotional core of the game. The game made me care about them, about their relationship with each other. These are brothers, and to see them needing to say goodbye to one of their closest friends, it is touching. It's a nice sentiment. It's a nice feeling. Well, I mean, not a nice feeling, but it's done well. And I appreciated it, and I felt it, and I said, yes, by God, this works. It's the only part of the entire 3 endings that does. But it works so well that I'm going to hold the successes as equal to the failures. The very final sequence, the post-credit sequence, has Noctis reunited finally with Luna Freya in the afterlife. They embrace. It's a nice scene. It sort of leads into what the new title screen looks like. Actually, directly leads into it. And it's kind of touching. But again, because we didn't see them really interact with each other all that much, because their relationship was sort of there because it had to be versus because it was natural. Once again, to point to something else that isn't this game, you could sort of, but not really, point to the relationship between Padme and Anakin. They're in love because they're supposed to be, not because it works organically from the story that's being told. Because of that, I thought, well, this is nice, this is sort of touching, but I really don't feel any emotion towards this because I was never given to care about this relationship, nor was I really led to really believe in it. So it's nice, it's a nice sentiment, but it rings emotionally hollow. And that's extraordinarily disappointing, because if the relationships between these characters, if the backstory about Noct's ring, if all of this had been built into the game properly, these endings could have had a huge impact. Unfortunately, except for Nox saying goodbye to his friends because he knows he has to die to heal the world, they suck. Okay? It's just they ring hollow. They ring hollow. Despite everything I've said here, despite all of my bitching, kvetching, all my griping, I still thoroughly enjoyed this game. The last third is extremely disappointing. So many missed opportunities. I mean, I want to know how GLaDOS got that extra scar. I want to know how Ignis lost his vision. I want to know how the fuck Prompto got that goddamn hoverbike. Just as an example of storytelling opportunities that were missed. And despite my misgivings, I still thoroughly enjoyed it. The first 2/3 more than make up for the lackluster last third. It's unfortunate that the storytelling in this game, a Final Fantasy game that these generally speaking live or die by their stories. It's a shame that the story here is so poorly told because, and I reiterate here, there is an interesting story hiding behind the surface. Hiding under the surface, just below, there is a good, interesting story that's begging to be told. Unfortunately, it was told so piss poorly that it's immensely disappointing. But the gameplay is so good, and the characters are, the main quartet are so likable that, I mean, hell yeah, I recommend it. It's not often you'll get me recommending a game where I think, well, the last bit sucked. But ultimately, when I look back at it, I had a good time. But I still think, even though you like something, you can still look at it critically and say, you know what, there were issues with this. There were things that could have been better. And the only way we can better ourselves as people, but let's just focus on the artist side of things. Maybe we can better ourselves as artists is when we're engaging in anything, whether it's a video game or a book or a movie, and notice where these things went wrong, how they went wrong, and why they went wrong, so that in our own work we can try to avoid those pitfalls. And I hope that the team at Square look at Final Fantasy 15, see what they did well, and see where they utterly failed, so that when 16 comes along, or 17, depending on whether 16 is another online game, well, hopefully they can fix it, and hopefully the next one can be as awesome and as epic as 6 was. Because I'm sorry, I hold 6 on a very high pedestal, so get cracking, Square, okay? No, seriously, in the end, Final Fantasy 15 is well worth playing. Give it a shot. Just be prepared for a lackluster endgame.
Whoa! This is awesome. Taking the high road.
Where we're going, you don't need roads.